Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Unconfined Conversations with Ryan and Steve. I'm Ryan, this is my main man Steve, coming to you from the Unconfined Conversations studio. See, things are a little bit different. We've upgraded a little bit. We have some wireless mics, and now we don't have these giant pterodactyl arms with microphones blocking our view. So hopefully this will be a great step forward for us and for you as well. So Steve, today we're going to be talking about something that really affected both of us in somewhat different ways, but really affects, I would say, the vast majority of people who are in prison. And today specifically we're going to be talking about the men who are in prison, and we're going to be talking about fatherhood and the fathers that are in prison and the fathers who are outside of prison, who have sons that are in prison. And fatherhood is a very, very, I would say, noticeable aspect of being in prison. You and I were in prison long enough where we saw a lot of fathers come in who had young children, teenagers, some of them who were a little bit older, they had older children. But the effect of incarceration on younger fathers when they have school-age children, especially, that can be a really hard thing. And there can be a lot of feelings that are associated with that separation because the father is now in prison. And one of those feelings is guilt. And it may be the strongest feeling that a father who is incarcerated has. And there are many reasons for it, and maybe the main reason is because they feel guilty because their actions separated themselves from their children.
Right.
And now their children are out there without their father being present, without their father there to give them guidance and advice, and without their father there to give them comfort. And it can be a really traumatic thing for both the father and for the children. So, in your experience in prison and witnessing some of these fathers and their separation from their children and that whole dynamic of being incarcerated while having children on the outside, what are some of the things that you've noticed or things that stuck out to you about that whole dynamic?
I would say we didn't discuss this prior, but I remember I had this job inside a prison that allowed me the freedom to go cell to cell, unit to unit. I worked for the chapel, and this particular time I was out and about, and I noticed that everything was quiet. Nobody was out running around, nobody was out doing their job or loitering or whatever, and I just thought that was weird, And so I started to go to cell just to see what was going on, what everybody was watching, or why everybody was so quiet. And it seemed like every cell I went to, they were watching the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 90s one. Do you remember that
Really?
one? Yes. Every cell was watching it. And it wasn't because it was a new release movie. It was because that particular demographic of people, be it fathers or older fathers or young fathers, who just had a similar experience with their children watching that movie. It doesn't make a difference, but either which way, everybody was watching it, and the consensus was that, hey, my kid used to watch this, and I used to watch it with them. That to me was like eye-opening, because I realized something there. I realized that, to your point, that these fathers are struggling. These fathers are struggling with the guilt. These fathers are struggling with, being separated. And I think just in watching that movie, it was such a reminder of being home or being present, in the home. And to me, like, this whole subject of fatherhood, fatherlessness, fatherhood and guilt, and fatherhood and crime, it's worth highlighting because I feel like there is a data point here that is worth looking at, namely to be able to look at areas of rehabilitation. You know, how do we, as a system, get better at promoting being a father who is present or knows how to father, you know, knows how to be dad.
So like fostering fatherhood principles and fostering connections and things like that, right? Yeah. You know, you mentioned in our pre-recording meeting that the prison system is now resurrecting an old program, which is going to allow fathers to read books to their children. And this was something that was first brought about, oh gosh, I would say over 20 years ago.
Oh yeah. Well, VHSs.
We're going to tell how old we are right now. So
how old he is? I'm young.
That's not the issue here, folks. America, pray for me. So over 20 years ago, I was in Jameson at the time. So this was early 2000s. And they came up with and they came up with, he was there too. And they came up with a program for fathers to read books to their children. And what they would do is they would set up a video recorder in the library, and you could pick out a children's book, and they would record you reading the book to your child. And then they would take the VHS tape and the book, put it in a mailer, and then mail it to your child. So then your child could not only watch you read a story to them, but they could have the actual book that you read from. And it was a huge hit, and I don't know how many dozens upon dozens upon dozens of men, of fathers, participated in that program as a way to connect to their children, as a way to be quote-unquote present in front of their children. And I'll just give an example of a mutual friend of ours who did that for his children. And he had to go back and re-sign up for the program multiple times because his children would watch that VHS tape over and over and over again to the point where it wore it out. And he had to record another one and send it back to them. Folks, if you're old enough to know why a VHS tape wears out, then you know.
Be kind and rewind.
Be kind and rewind. So that was a wonderful program in order to foster that connection. And now they're resurrecting it again, which I think is a wonderful idea.
It's a fantastic touch to the system.
Absolutely. And good on them for doing that. Wherever the idea come from, it doesn't matter. But the fact is that they're doing it. And for the father who is inside and able to do something like that for their children, it gives them a sense of upliftment and can help tamp down at least a little bit some of that guilt that they feel.
Well, it's lost time, and one of the things that stinks about the system is how much time literally is taken from an individual or individuals, children in this case. How much time is lost in incarceration years on end. A little soapbox for 1 second, the length of sentence. Some of the most formative years in a child's life are taken, yes, because of someone's addiction or someone's choice, sadly, but that problem or this problem that we're talking about now, I think only gets compounded by having years on end as sentences like, hey, this is going to be the solution to it. And really, I don't think that's necessarily the solution either. Having extra amount of years to think about what you did, having extra amount of years to think about what I did. And I would say within the first 10 years, I really understood the importance of why I was there. And just to tag the subject of fatherlessness, I worked hard at forgiving my father for not ever being there. And it took literally a chaplain to be able to tell me the truth about my anger and my resentment and my bitterness towards my father. It took a chaplain literally getting in my face and saying, it's time for you to forgive. You're 27 years old and you're still angry and upset about your father leaving when you were 6 months old. So some of these wounds, some of this pain, some of this anger and confusion and bitterness and guilt goes back that far, and again, having people to really challenge you in that position, to say that there's a better way out of this. You don't have to stay in guilt. You don't have to succumb to hopelessness. That one father felt that I spent a little bit of time with. He said, and this was like a week after my dad passed away, while I was incarcerated. Your father passed away while you were incarcerated. Just not a very pleasant experience to go through, but I had forgiven my father. I feel like our relationship ended on a good note. I still have a letter less than 10 feet away from me right now that has the words, "I love you, son." I love you. And it's like, wow, I've waited all my life to hear those words. But anyway, I was spending time with this older gentleman, and he said, I just feel like such a loser. I feel like my kids aren't going to want anything to do with me because I pursued my addiction. And I told this father, right after my father passed away, I said, that's not true. I said, I just lost my father last week. And the thought that I had as a 34-year-old man was, well, now who's going to teach me how to fish? And I just thought that was such a strange thought to have on the heels of my father just having passed away. Really strange thought. Now who's going to teach me how to fish? I feel like I can fish. I feel like I have the understanding of what it takes to fish. But for that feeling to bubble to the surface, in the midst of guilt, was strange to me. But I understood it, and I shared with this man. I said, that's not the case. I'm 34 years old, and I still have a yearning for my father to be in my life, and I don't have that opportunity. So,
yeah, I think along with the guilt for fathers who are incarcerated, I think along with guilt comes anxiety. Mm-hmm. The anxiety of, what if my kids love me less? What if my kids stop yearning for me? What if my kids move on from me? And that's especially true with guys who have longer sentences. Mm-hmm. And so then the fear and the anxiety is, well, okay, yeah, I have kids, but they've moved on from wanting their father. And I would just say, on the heels of what you just gave as a great example, most kids, I think, no matter how old they are, whether it has been a great relationship with their father or a strained relationship with their father, whether there has been closeness or distance, mm-hmm. most kids still yearn for a relationship with their father, mm-hmm. to some measurable degree. Whether that's a lot or whether that's just a little, mm-hmm. they still do. And so I would say to those incarcerated fathers to just maintain hope, mm-hmm. that one day, if you have the opportunity to be released, that you'll be able to not only reconnect with your children, but also be able to reform some of those bonds that you had before. And I'll give a great example of that. A mutual friend of ours went to prison, and he had two very young children. Very young. I think the oldest one might have been 7. And the youngest one may have been a little, maybe 5 or so. Very young children. And, he thought, gosh, I got to be here for a few years. How am I going to stay connected to my children? And you know what he did? He started to learn how to crochet. And he crocheted like little action figures. He did dinosaurs. He did cars. He did transformers that actually transformed.
Get out of here.
Like, it was amazing. And he didn't know how to do this stuff, but he just knew that he needed to do something to stay connected with his kids. He would call maybe every other week or so and talk to them. But he knew that that wasn't going to be enough. So out of, I think, desperation, in order to maintain a connection with his kids, he found a way to do something for them. And they may have seemed like these little things, little something, but it turns out in the end, those little things meant a lot, because when he got out of prison, they still had all of those crocheted items. They still had every letter that he wrote to them.
Awesome.
They still had all the stuff that he ever made for them. And because of that effort that he made, now he's been able to foster a closer relationship with them. And now he's heavily involved in their lives.
That's awesome.
And they love him to death because he put forth the effort. So I would just say to the fathers who are incarcerated to maintain hope and just do what you can. Even if it's a little bit, your children will appreciate it, and they will remember it, and they will cherish it. And even if those fathers can't hear our voices right now, to the mothers of those children whose father is in prison, give them that encouragement to make little efforts, and those little efforts will go a mile when it comes to those children.
100%. I have a family member who recently went through incarceration as well, and I had an opportunity to speak with his child's mother at a barbecue, I think, and we were conversing, and she had all these reservations and hesitancies about, allowing her precious son to be in the presence of his father. Excuse me. She had hesitation about allowing her precious son to be in the presence of his father, especially as this father was dealing with his addiction. Now, keep in mind, he was incarcerated. And my encouragement, and not just out of favor, because this man is a family member, but because I knew it was right. Because I, too, have been in that position where it's like, man, why doesn't my dad love me? Why doesn't my dad spend time around me? Why doesn't my dad pursue me? Why doesn't my dad talk with me? Why doesn't he write me a letter? Why doesn't he call? Why doesn't he pick me up, And so I could just about imagine for my little young relative, he's a little boy, having those same questions. So my encouragement to this mother was, give him the opportunity to see his son, because I guarantee that it will be more helpful than hurtful when it comes to this father being able to make good, positive, healthy choices post-incarceration, or even while he was incarcerated. And lo and behold, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that she listened to me, but lo and behold, this man got out of incarceration, and as early as 2 weeks ago, I got the opportunity to witness him and his son spending time together. And it really just blessed my heart. And I love that. I love that a mom said, I need to make it a point to have my son be involved in his father's life, if for nothing else, for my son. But at the very most, and we're talking about it, the guilt, of putting your addiction over your children. And in this case, this father has an opportunity to be reconnected, but also somewhat redeem the time. And to me, it was such a blessing to just observe that.
That is a blessing for sure. And I would say most children, probably especially younger children, one of their great qualities is their ability to forgive. Mm-hmm. And for a father to be forgiven by their child mm-hmm. because of choices that the father made to separate himself from that child, that can go a long way for that father to be able to heal himself mm-hmm. from that guilt. Mm-hmm. Because that guilt can weigh heavily upon a father mm-hmm. Who has done things by his own decisions in order to separate himself from his children. Mm-hmm. On the other side of that, there are fathers whose sons have gone to prison mm-hmm. and the guilt that they have. And I'll just give an example. So when I went to prison, I think at the time my father was he was maybe in his early 50s, I think. And I think he had, and my mother too, but we're talking about fathers. Mm-hmm. I think he had a fair amount of guilt because he thought, well, what did I do wrong? Was I not good enough as a father? Did I not teach him enough? Did I not guide him enough? How did I fail him as a father where he made the decisions that he made in order to go to prison and to go to prison for a long time? And that guilt became compounded by pressures that he felt socially mm-hmm. from people around him who insinuated or plainly said it. Oh, there's so-and-so, his son is in prison. And I'm sure he never said it to me, but knowing my father, I can safely assume that he felt a lot of guilt about that. And it affected him terribly. And I think it affected me later on in my life as I got older, because I was able to recognize that guilt that he had. And that guilt then therefore transferred to me because I felt guilt because I changed his life forever of being just a regular guy, a farmer, a husband, to a guy who has a son who's incarcerated, and changing the trajectory of his life because he and my mom continued to dedicate themselves to me and my incarceration by visiting me every other week.
Good for them.
By sending me money when they could, by dedicating their love and affection and dedication and support to me. It totally changed the trajectory of their lives. And as I got older and more mature and wiser, that guilt then transferred to me because I was like, look what I did to my parents. Look what I did to my father, causing him to feel this way about himself when it wasn't him at all, it was me.
Interesting.
And I think fathers who have sons who are incarcerated, their form of guilt is just a little bit different, I think.
I would say definitely, yeah. I think of this movie, and it's not important which movie it is, but this son is really struggling, with the lack of relationship with his father. And his father was somebody important. And the son started to apologize to his father, and the father quiets him, and he says, "Your flaws as a son are my failures as a father." And that always stuck with me, because I'm like, wow,
That's really powerful.
it's powerful, but
Wow.
it really highlights the subject, the importance of parenthood. The importance of parents literally being invested in the lives of their children. Now, I don't say this to compound any kind of guilt. I say this to encourage any kind of parent, wherever you're at, whatever you're currently enduring. Make a positive choice to literally invest in the life of your child, whether it's reading, whether it's writing, whether it's journaling, whether it's, I'm going to take my child to the visit room, the prison, to see his father. I'm going to take my child to the visit room to see his grandfather. Some important role, some important relationship to help foster growth, to help work through those issues of those feelings of guilt, rather. To me, those are all positive steps in the right direction. We commend the Department of Corrections for re-implementing the reading program, for their kids, because literally there's data that proves, and I know this, and I'm going to quote a man by the name of Tom Clegg. I was able to meet him in Michigan one time. We were staying at the same hotel. We were up there for a conference, and we had just a wonderful conversation with this guy. And this guy was a consultant that travels all over the world and consults. And he heard a little piece of my story, got to asking me questions, and came quickly to this point where he says, "Do you know the data that supports if a parent does not read to their child, that child is more likely to go to prison?"
Really?
Really?
That's a real data set?
Really?
Wow.
Because he flushed it out. He's like, "What do you think it is?" And I'm like, "Well, a father not being there. Well, rebellion in the heart. Having a sin-fallen heart, and you're just bent towards evil. All this kind of stuff." And he's like, "Nope, nope, nope." And he says, "It's just reading." I could have fallen over in my chair backwards.
Oh my gosh.
What? And he goes, "Yeah, it's reading." He says, when a father or a mother reads to their child, it's a bonding thing.
Right, right.
First and foremost.
Yeah.
Let's not skirt around that. But to know that there's specific data that shows the connection, the correlation between not reading to your child, and I can already hear the comments, all right? People are going to say, "Well, hold on, wait. So you're saying if I don't read to my child that they're going to go to prison?" No. It's just that there's a correlation between those data points. People who have been incarcerated and maybe have been asked the question, "Did your parent read to you?" "Nope." "Interesting."
Right.
So, very fascinating information. And to me, it's hard to argue against data. It really is.
Correct. And I think for those of our listeners and our viewers who are fathers, who have a son that's incarcerated, I think the encouragement that we can give to you is just continue in whatever ways that you're allowed, but also in whatever ways that you're able to just maintain the connection and support and dedication into your son's life. Mm-hmm. It will mean a lot, and I'll just use my own father as the example. He and my mom stuck with me the whole time that I was in prison. He died about 3 or 4 years before I was able to get out of prison. Mm-hmm. So he never got to see me as a free man. Never got to.
Excuse me. Talk about this. So I'm not changing the subject. This is within the vein.
So for our viewers, you'll be able to see, and for our listeners, you won't be able to see it, but if you tune into YouTube or Facebook, you'll be able to see this. But behind us on our wall here in our studio are things that belonged to both Steve and I, whether it was our parents, our grandparents, whatever it is. I have a few things up here. Steve has a few things up here. And this thing right behind me here is an old nail puller.
Not fingernail puller, all right?
Not fingernail puller. Oh my gosh, can you imagine if this was to pull your fingernails? It'd be a torture device.
Maybe old fingernail clippers, look at it.
Old fingernail clippers. But what it is it's a nail puller. And
why?
Because back in the day, this is a Depression era tool.
Sure.
This tool was made in the 1910s, and back then people didn't have a lot of money, so they had to reuse nails. They would pull nails, straighten them, and reuse them on new construction. We were just poor farmers when I was growing up, and we didn't have a lot of money, and so we would pull nails out of old buildings, out of boards, and I would take a hammer and straighten them on the anvil, and we would reuse nails. We had buckets of used nails that we had pulled, and this was a thing from our farm that I really treasure and keep because it reminds me of my father and the toil that he had in his life as someone who never had a lot of money, someone who worked hard, someone who worked his nails to the quick, so to speak, during his career as a farmer. But yeah, that's what this is, and it reminds me of my father a lot. And towards the end of my incarceration, when he was still alive, we really had a great relationship. And it was because of his dedication and because of his continued support. And I started to become more and more curious about family history, about where we came from, about his childhood, about his upbringing. And that just came with age and maturity on my part to be more interested in him. So I grew to really appreciate my father a lot for who he was, how he was with my mother, but even more so, despite his age, his health, his sickness, still coming up and visiting me. And so to the fathers who are listening, who have children who are incarcerated, being present in their lives will help to uplift them in ways that they will continue to love you and be dedicated to you, and it'll help to ease some of the guilt that you may have when it comes to where did I go wrong with my child, right? And for the men who are incarcerated and separated from their fathers, we ended up turning towards father figures and older men and mentors in prison in lieu of the presence of our own fathers. And that's what we're going to talk about in our next episode, is about mentorship and father figures while we're in prison. So until next time, check us out on all of our social media platforms. Like, comment, and subscribe to all of our channels. And if you have a comment, please drop it down below. We'll try to get to you as much as we can and have even more unconfined conversations. So for now, I'm Ryan, this is Steve, and we'll see you next time on Unconfined Conversations.